Nancy Guthrie has vanished into thin air, and the obsession with finding her has reached a fever pitch across the nation. Search her name online right now, and you will be absolutely buried under an avalanche of theories and digital noise. We are talking endless press briefings, dissected surveillance clips, cryptic crypto wallets, and DNA evidence that leads to dead ends. While the public plays detective, I have dedicated the last 3 weeks to a complete immersion in the gritty details of this investigation. I pulled everything from obscured court documents to buried real estate deeds. My research included everything from search trend analytics to archived criminal records that made my blood run cold. The narrative dominating the news cycle is deceptively simple and convenient. A random predator allegedly spotted a vulnerable senior, forced his way inside under the cover of darkness, and abducted her. That is the official line from law enforcement, but if you scratch the surface, the logic begins to crumble. Buried beneath the sensational headlines lies a much darker, more complex reality. The official timeline is riddled with holes, and certain personal connections are screaming for scrutiny that they are not getting. The sheer volume of specific coincidences piling up suggests these events were calculated moves rather than random chance. My goal is to lay out the raw data, and I promise that by the end, your perspective on this crime will be permanently altered. The first red flag appeared on January 23, 2026, in a bizarre clip uploaded to a neighborhood safety app. It shows a figure moving in reverse up a private driveway in the foothills, steps precise and controlled. He isn't stumbling or intoxicated. He is executing a disciplined backward march with his spine pressed flat against the camera's view. To understand the chilling brilliance of this move, you have to understand the hardware limitations of modern home security. Systems like Ring are not constantly recording. They are dormant until a passive sensor detects a shift in heat signatures. Once triggered, the internal processor needs a moment to wake up and adjust the exposure settings. Establishing a connection to the cloud creates a lag of roughly 1 to 2 seconds before video capture begins. Approaching normally gives the lens just enough time to snap a clear image of your face. By approaching backward, this individual guarantees that the camera only wakes up to film a generic hoodie and a nondescript bag. He is effectively exploiting the hardware's boot-up sequence to remain anonymous while entering the perimeter. This isn't the work of a chaotic opportunist. This is a calculated exploit by someone who read the manual. But the detail that truly froze me in my tracks was the equipment he brought with him. The backpack visible in that rehearsal footage is a dead ringer for the one spotted at the crime scene 9 days later. It is an Ozark Trail 25-liter daypack with specific reflective piping appearing 6.5 miles away from the primary target. This was clearly a dry run performed in a location carefully chosen for its similarities. Investigators refer to this as a geographic buffer, a safe space to practice without linking back to the victim. He chose a spot distant enough to avoid suspicion, yet identical enough to serve as a perfect training ground. Both properties are secluded desert estates situated at the end of long, winding drives. Both neighborhoods strictly limit streetlights, providing him with the heavy shadows he needed for cover. He was stress testing his plan, and when a neighbor's dog sounded the alarm, his reaction was telling. Instead of turning around to look, he suppressed every human instinct to check the threat. He risked a physical injury just to keep his face hidden, proving that his discipline was stronger than his fear. Now contrast that rigid caution with the demeanor of the intruder at Nancy's door 9 days later. On February 1st, the backward walk is gone, replaced by a confident forward stride. He approaches the entryway with a terrifying casualness, completely unbothered by the surveillance. Then he performs an action so brazen I had to replay it 4 times to process it. He reaches out and gives the camera lens 2 rhythmic taps, like he is greeting an old friend. A week prior, he was twisting his body to hide from the lens. Now he is physically interacting with it. The psychological shift is massive, and it stems from the success of his January experiment. He realized that his test run went unnoticed, and that silence taught him he was untouchable. By the time he reached the Guthrie residence, he wasn't practicing anymore. He was performing. Let me know in the comments if you think this theory holds water or if I'm reading too deep. The information I'm revealing today has completely polarized the online community. One faction believes the man I will identify is simply a heartbroken family member. The opposing side is convinced he stands as the single deadliest figure in this entire mystery. By the time we finish, you will need to pick a side. Let us dive right in. Just 4 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's porch sits a residence in Tucson, Arizona, which is a quick 10-minute trip on empty roads at 2 in the morning. Residing there is Nancy's eldest child, Annie Guthrie, along with her spouse, Tommaso Cian. Annie earns her living as a poet and creates jewelry. Her professional life is based at the University of Arizona Poetry Center. During an interview in 2013, she referred to her partner as her supreme mentor and labeled him a powerful manifester. She claimed that the way he lives his life is a form of poetry itself. Keep that term, great manifester, in mind because it will feel very strange by the time we conclude this story. Tommaso Cian is a 50-year-old educator in the sciences. For more than 15 years, he has instructed advanced placement biology classes at a local charter institution. Originally, he hails from San Giovanni Valdarno, a tiny village located in Tuscany. He relocated to the Arizona desert in 2006. Besides playing bass guitar for a group named Early Black, he crafts pasta from scratch. He goes out into nature to hunt wild mushrooms. He also spends time observing lizards. According to all available records, he appears to be a silent, average guy leading a standard existence in the Southwest. Yet he stands as the final individual to view Nancy Guthrie while she was breathing. Nancy passed the night of January 31st over at the home of Annie and Tommaso. They shared a meal, played some games, and enjoyed family bonding. This brings us to the initial detail that demands your full focus. The accounts regarding the subsequent events are completely contradictory. Certain reports claim Tommaso gave Nancy a ride back and verified she was secure indoors around 9:50 in the evening. Alternative versions suggest Annie was the driver. Some even state they went together. The narrative shifts based on the speaker and the timeline. When dealing with an investigation where seconds count, lacking a solid answer regarding who physically saw Nancy last is hardly a minor point. It serves as a crucial cornerstone. Precisely at 1:47 in the morning, someone physically unplugged the Nest surveillance unit at Nancy's residence. Assuming the drop-off happened at 9:50, we are looking at a window of 3 hours and 57 minutes. Round that up to 4 hours. 4 hours feels like a lifetime. It provides ample opportunity to return to your base. You can wait until the block goes quiet, put on a mask, head back out, leave the car, blocks away, approach the target on foot, carry out the mission, and return to your pillow before the sun rises. There is no verified proof of Tommaso's whereabouts during that time frame released to the public. Annie lacks a substantiated alibi as well. They share the same roof. Any story one tells the other one corroborates. Let that sink in for a moment. We need to discuss the events on the front deck because the physical movements are what blow this mystery wide open. This trespasser did not move like some random outsider. Specialists in nonverbal communication and retired federal operatives note that the figure navigates the area with the instinctual certainty of a frequent visitor. He never scans for the surveillance gear. He strides right up to the lens. There is zero pause at the entryway. He understands the deck's configuration, the location of the decorative floor he uses to block the view, and precisely where the device is mounted. Profilers refer to this specific trait as ownership behavior. It represents a psychological state where the offender believes they possess a valid reason to occupy that zone. He is not behaving like a burglar raiding an unfamiliar house. He moves like a landlord patrolling his own property. Tapping the lens in that rhythm isn't a strategic villainous tactic. It is a routine tick. It is the sort of action you perform on an item you encounter daily. You need to ask yourself a question. Who possesses a mental map of Nancy's residence, etched so firmly in their mind that they could traverse it in pitch blackness without faltering for a second? Who was aware of every sensor location? Who realized she was not paying for an active Nest recording plan? Who understood her daily schedule, when she slept, what pills she took, and how her doors were arranged? Tommaso Chion ate meals at that place constantly. He ran chores for Nancy. He and Annie helped manage the estate. He has been stepping across that threshold for almost 20 years. If a single person exists whose automatic reflexes would generate that specific walking style on that deck, it is the guy who stood there 4 hours prior. Yet here is the twist in the investigation that keeps me up at night. Even if Tommaso Chion ranks as a prime suspect here, he is also a massive contradiction. Examine the equipment the perpetrator wore. A $22 balaclava bought at a Tucson athletic shop in a desert region that sees zero snowfall. Who exactly is purchasing winter face coverings in Tucson during January? That single buy would trigger alarms in any sales log. A $10 box of nitrile gloves, a $20 Ozark trail bag from Walmart featuring reflective bands that shine like beacons under night vision, plus a belly band gun holder fastened over a heavy coat that flopped around awkwardly worn in a totally incorrect manner. An ex-Secret Service operative remarked nobody with a single afternoon of combat instruction would ever carry a weapon that way. The entire outfit rings up for under $100, creating an image of total amateur hour. But hold that thought while we scrutinize our main suspect. Tommaso Chioni is not some random transient. He isn't a high school dropout. The man is an AP biology instructor. Handling that kind of curriculum requires serious cognitive skills, meticulous planning, and a strong grasp of complex logic. You need a sharp, orderly mind to do that job. That is precisely why his defenders are shouting their argument from the rooftops. They claim he is far too brilliant to make such rookie mistakes. However, let us consider the exact opposite perspective. Imagine you are a genius plotting a major felony, and your primary goal is to remain completely anonymous. As a rational educator trying to abduct a person and vanish, what is your absolute top priority? You need authorities chasing a phantom that looks nothing like you. So you invent a persona and act the part. You intentionally purchase bottom-barrel mismatched equipment from a generic retailer. You even botch the holster placement to look clueless. The goal is to make federal agents hunt for a junkie or a drifter keeping their eyes off the esteemed teacher with a graduate degree. Strategists refer to this specific tactic as weaponized ineptitude. If that is indeed the play, we must face a chilling reality. The plan is succeeding because we are here arguing about it. Those blunders aren't errors. They could be the most brilliant strokes of the whole scheme. There is another detail regarding his kit that is flying under the radar. The hand protection. Black nitrile gloves. We aren't seeing tactical leather or surgical latex here. It is nitrile. The stuff found in science labs, kitchens, and workshops. Ask yourself, who wears that specific type of protective gear on a daily basis? Science instructors do. Keone manages advanced labs where kids work with dissection samples, chemical agents, and organic matter. Those gloves are a staple in his profession. Storing a carton of them at home wouldn't raise a single eyebrow. It is totally normal, which is precisely the issue. Their common nature renders them effectively unnoticeable. Our perpetrator was also aware of the extra surveillance units past the front porch. Law enforcement stated they are attempting to pull video from the perimeter, but the victim lacked active recording plans for them. The intruder understood the full security grid and knew for a fact that nothing was being saved to the cloud. You cannot glean those specific details from a simple online map query. That knowledge comes from walking the halls installing the devices and hearing the homeowner complain about monthly fees because you are related. We need to discuss an obscure link that most observers have missed. Pay close attention because the chronology is crucial. Back in February 2024, roughly 12 months prior to the abduction, Savannah Guthrie released a memoir titled Mostly What God Does. Inside, she outlined a specific family ritual. Each summer season, her cousin Terry would stage a mock abduction involving Savannah and her sibling Annie. He would rouse them before sunrise, load everyone into a vehicle, and transport them from Tucson up to Phoenix. During the trip, the kids would phone Nancy and exclaim, "Mom, we have been snatched by cousin Terry." Nancy always rolled with it. She feigned surprise and vowed to retrieve them later in the week. Let me repeat that for emphasis. Guthrie wrote a bestseller detailing how they played abduction games at that very Tucson residence with Annie, while Nancy joked about it on the line. A year down the road, the fantasy turned into a nightmare. I am not alleging a link. I am simply citing a public text available for purchase. Make of that what you will. Let's track the finances, since cash is always the driving force or a distraction. Here the figures weave a distinct narrative. Nancy's residence in the hills is worth about $1 million. She has held the deed since 1985. Annie and Tommaso live 2 miles out in a house worth $650,000. His teaching salary keeps them far from being millionaires. Contrast that with Savannah Guthrie, who sits on a fortune estimated at $40 million. She rakes in huge sums yearly from the network. The crypto ransom asked for $6 million. That figure wasn't pulled from thin air. It was a computed amount. The perp knew the family's wealth structure. They knew exactly what Savannah could pay without raising too many red flags. A leaked file appeared on the web indicating that on May 16, 2025, Tommaso Cioni granted his wife full legal authority over his assets and personal matters via power of attorney. Attorneys might claim this is standard procedure for property deals, and they aren't wrong. These forms get processed daily, yet the date stands out May 2025. Rewind the clock 8 months prior to Nancy vanishing into thin air, and you land square on a chilling timeline overlap involving digital scouting of her residence. An unknown figure in Arizona began digitally stalking her location in March of 2025, and merely 2 months later, Tommaso started shuffling his legal deck. Come June, those location queries fired up again, followed by a December search originating from Tucson regarding Savannah Guthrie's earnings. Is the power of attorney paperwork the smoking gun here? I cannot claim that as absolute fact, yet the record shows that during the spring and summer of 2025, precisely when a mystery user in Arizona was virtually casing Nancy Guthrie's private sanctuary, Tommaso Cioni was busy tidying up his financial backyard. Frankly, handing asset control to a spouse is hardly standard procedure unless you are plotting a move that ends in handcuffs or a vanishing act. That looks like calculated prep work, leaving Annie as the sole gatekeeper of their entire estate. This pivots the spotlight directly onto Annie, a figure I must discuss delicately since the press has largely ignored her, even though detectives certainly have not. Police actually seized her personal vehicle and hauled it into the impound lot as a key piece of this puzzle. Ashley Banfield broke this detail on her audio show, pointing to an insider with deep ties to the force and a stellar reputation. While the sheriff downplayed it later as routine protocol, you really need to pause and consider the heavy implication of seizing a car. Authorities generally do not confiscate a relative's ride if they believe a random stranger snatched the victim. That typically only happens when detectives suspect the machine played a role in the crime or holds microscopic forensic secrets. We remain in the dark about what evidence they hunted for or what they ultimately discovered inside that cabin. Law enforcement executed multiple warrants on the couple's residence, snapping photos of the interior and stripping security cameras from the walls. Yet the one specific action that stopped me in my tracks was their decision to open up and inspect the sewage system. Cameras from a local news station captured agents poking a long pole into the waste tank while shining beams into the muck. Nobody goes fishing in a septic tank unless they are hunting for an object someone was desperate to flush away, coinciding with the couple going totally silent after week 1. Journalist Brian Anton, who has been reporting from the Tucson streets since day 1 of this saga, noted that Tommaso effectively vanished for nearly 7 days, with the final sighting being a shot of him and Annie in a vehicle before they ghosted. They disappeared simultaneously, which brings us back to the messy, contradicting narratives regarding who actually drove Nancy that day. Certain accounts claim it was Tommaso, others point to Annie, and a few suggest they were both present. When standard procedure dictates scrutinizing the last known contact above all else, a discrepancy like that is a massive red flag. Detectives can tell the difference between memory fog and a coordinated script. Now let us address a topic that unsettles the web sleuths. We must examine Tommaso Cian's close associates, specifically regarding his role as a basis for the local group Early Black. Playing alongside him in that musical lineup is a fellow named Dominic Evans. Pima County legal documents reveal that Evans faces serious charges ranging from felony burglary and robbery to theft and embezzlement. As soon as Banfield tagged Tommaso as a person of interest, digital detectives scoured his friends list, and Evans immediately popped up on the radar. Tactical units subsequently stormed a property in the vicinity tied to the wider scope of this inquiry. Consider the weight of that rap sheet regarding this specific mystery. We're not talking about shoplifting, but robbery and burglary. Those offenses involve forcibly breaching a location and stripping possessions from their rightful owners. If Tommaso required an associate who knew the ins and outs of home invasion, had prior experience, and would not panic at the threshold, his search radius would be incredibly short, extending only to the guy jamming beside him during rehearsal. To remain fair, no hard proof currently ties Dominic Evans to the abduction of Nancy Guthrie, yet you cannot ignore how close they were. His history with the law is relevant. His presence in Tommaso's orbit is crucial because the sheriff explicitly stated, "A partner's possible, a theory." The physical traces seem to back up. Federal agents recovered 2 distinct genetic signatures, one located on a glove, tossed just 2 meters from the residence. The second sample came from indoors. They do not match each other, the victim's relatives, or any offender currently listed in the national database. We have 2 genetic codes in 2 spots, implying 2 individuals. This is not wild guessing, it is cold hard math. One entity deposited biology inside the dwelling, while a completely different entity left their mark on a glove found along a likely getaway path. If this offense involved a duo, then any hypothesis suggesting a solitary, obsessed stalker starts to crumble. Conversely, the concept of a planned mission involving a mastermind and a hired hand gains significant traction. This leads us to a disturbing psychological aspect of the crime that few are discussing loudly enough. That clip of the backward walker from January 23rd appeared thanks to a standard resident using the Ring Neighbors platform, which functions as a social feed for safety. Users typically flag lost pets or porch pirates, but in a scheme this precise, the odds are terrifyingly high that the predator is lurking on that very same network. He is far more than a phantom in the system, he's a verified user. Any stalker performing a dry run 9 days beforehand is fixated on the outcome. He probably wasted the following morning refreshing the neighborhood feed for that specific zone, desperate to see if he was spotted. He scoured the local chatter to gauge his stealth, and seeing the footage posted without an ID offered him something far deadlier than luck. It provided absolute certainty. The very tools designed for our protection became his personal feedback mechanism, transforming the alert system into a mirror for his disguise. That specific reassurance emboldened him to advance his plan rather than retreat. 9 days afterward, demands went straight to TMZ and Arizona outlets rather than Savannah Guthrie herself or her kin. To the press, seasoned abductors handle business quietly and never invite reporters to the bargaining table. However, an actor aiming to fabricate an external danger, someone needing the public to blame a random intruder, runs straight to the news. Headlines about some random maniac serve only to build a wall between the true culprit and the detectives. The initial source contacting TMZ specifically referred to the priority target using the phrase the main individual repeated twice. Such specific wording suggests a chain of command pointing to multiple participants. It indicates the person reaching out knew the scheme had depth, including the crypto wallet designated for the payout. That account has stayed dead quiet with absolutely zero movement. Federal agents transferred a tiny sum as digital bait, monitoring that ledger constantly for any login attempts. The second anyone tries to view it, their hardware broadcasts a location ping. We get IP details and device tags, yet nobody has bitten revealing a crucial detail. A veteran syndicate would wash those funds instantly. Pros know how to cash out unseen, whereas this suspect remains frozen in place. He either spots the snare or lacks the nerve to act, fitting the mold of someone smart enough to open an account. Yet he is too green to navigate it securely like a science teacher. A person grasping the theoretical mechanics while missing the street smarts to pull it off in the real world. Here sits a disturbing reality regarding the broader context that should unsettle every viewer concerning the Today Show. Ever since Savannah took her leave, the program has surged back to the #1 spot. They secured a massive lead over Good Morning America, specifically with adults aged 25 to 50. Her personal nightmare fueled their most profitable quarter. I'm not implying the network orchestrated this event, but we must acknowledge that prolonged coverage generates massive revenue. Asking who gains from keeping the narrative alive remains essential, even if the conclusion feels grimy. Insiders inform News Nation that Savannah is weighing a permanent departure from the broadcast. She reportedly believes her profession put a target on her mother and refuses to gamble with her family's safety again. A high-level producer stated there is absolutely no path for her return. Whispers already suggested an exit by late 2026, so the abduction likely just hit the fast-forward button. This is precisely where that specific fact dovetails with the conspiracy theory. If she quits her salary, vanishes, and the household budget shifts, implying the mastermind designed this plot with intimate knowledge of those finances. They understood exactly what she made likely researching it from a computer in Tucson. We must pause to be objective, because despite how tightly the puzzle pieces squeeze Tommaso Cian and Nancy Guthrie, there are hard facts that challenge the prevailing theory, specifically height. A reporter analyzing public images of Tommaso determined he stands significantly taller than the 5'9" to 5'10" range described by agents. If true, he cannot be the figure on the veranda yet that hardly proves his innocence. It simply means he wasn't the foot soldier. In a two-person job, the planner and the muscle are rarely the same individual, which brings us to the official clearance. On February 16th, Sheriff Nanos officially removed the entire Guthrie clan from the suspect list. He stated they were ruled out early on after surrendering their devices, vehicles, and properties for search. He scolded the press for guessing and labeled the family as pure victims, but the public often misunderstands police strategy. Being cleared is not the same as being innocent. It merely means current proof cannot support an arrest. During major cases, publicly excusing relatives often serves as a calculated maneuver. It eliminates media pressure, lets detectives operate quietly and critically. It can cause the actual culprit to lower their guard. When the sheriff stands at the podium and declares you are no longer a person of interest, the immediate reaction is to exhale. You stop looking over your shoulder, you make that call you avoided yesterday. You finally check the crypto balance you were terrified to access. Being cleared isn't always the finish line. Sometimes it is the bait. The fact that the genetic material recovered from Nancy's house failed to match any relative is a massive detail. It implies that if Tommaso was actually standing there during the abduction, he left absolutely zero biological trace. Either he practiced ghost-like discipline, fitting for a science teacher who knows how to scrub a scene, or he simply wasn't in the room. This supports the idea of a partner or implies the DNA belongs to a complete outsider. It means the key to this entire mystery is currently sitting in a cold storage lab. Then we have to consider the stalker narrative. The theory suggests a stranger obsessed with Savannah Guthrie went after Nancy as a substitute, a vulnerable proxy. He took the path of least resistance to get close to his delusion. This reframes his actions not as someone who knew the house, but as someone who felt entitled to it. The intruder acted like he owned the place because in his warped mind, he was already part of the family unit. It interprets the ransom letters sent to the press as a desperate way for attention rather than a serious bid for cash. And it clarifies the inactivity on the Bitcoin wallet as the mark of someone who never cared about the financial payout. However, there is a gaping hole in the stalker hypothesis. It fails to account for the dry run performed 9 days prior. A maniac driven by chaotic obsession does not typically run calm, methodical drills from a safe distance. That demonstrates tactical planning. It also ignores the specific insight regarding Nancy's security blind spots and subscription lapses. A random drifter wouldn't know her Nest account was inactive. It doesn't explain why the feds have raided the son-in-law's property 5 separate times. They drained his septic tank and seized his wife's car. They ripped out their surveillance cameras and walked out carrying evidence bags. Megyn Kelly pointed this out explicitly. The reason investigators keep circling back to Annie and Tommaso is that they are still trying to connect them to the crime. She noted how strange it is for detectives to interview neighbors repeatedly. They keep digging for dirt on Annie and Tommaso, specifically unless they are actively constructing a case. So, where does the evidence stand? On one hand, you have the last people to see her living just 4 miles away, a 4-hour gap with zero alibi. Possessive body language on the porch, feigned clumsiness with the equipment, gloves that look like they came from a chemistry lab. Legal authority over assets signed 8 months early, a bandmate with a burglary sheet, a confiscated vehicle, a drained septic system, unexplained financial gaps, a novel about kidnapping published a year before the actual event, and a mystery bag hauled away by federal agents. On the other hand, you have the official narrative. No name suspects, the family is cleared foreign, DNA, a height mismatch, and the chance that a random predator stalked the house for months, only to fumble the execution the second he stepped inside. At this very moment, that evidence bag is likely under a microscope in a forensic facility. Experts are cross-referencing its contents against the roadside glove and the samples taken from the crime scene. Genetic genealogists are currently building family trees from distant cousin matches. Every twig on that tree leads to another, eventually narrowing the field down to a single identity. If that name links back to the guest who shared dinner with Nancy 4 hours before she vanished, then the coincidences we listed were never accidents. It was a design. The cheap disguise, the Walmart kit, the bad holster, the glowing backpack. It was all theater meant to distract us from the people who already held the keys to the front door. But if that sample belongs to a stranger, then Tommaso is just a tragic figure, a quiet teacher from Tuscany whose life was shredded by suspicion simply because he was the last to say goodbye. And Annie is just a poet whose car was seized and privacy invaded because the internet convicted her before the law did. Biology does not care about our theories. DNA ignores coincidences, body language analysis, legal documents, or eerie fiction books. The genetics will deliver a conclusion that no amount of acting can obscure. We are inching closer to that finality. But consider this before you leave. The dress rehearsal on January 23rd didn't just provide more footage to dissect it, handed detectives a second calendar date to verify. Before that clip surfaced, the whole case rested on a single 4-hour block on February 1st. A suspect only needed an alibi between 9:50 in the evening and 2 in the morning on that specific night. A charging phone or a dozing spouse used to be the ultimate safety net, but that entire playbook has just been shredded. Federal agents have moved past the standard interrogation of simply asking where you were the evening she vanished. They are now demanding to know your exact location on January 23rd at 2 in the morning, a pivot that should strike fear into the perpetrator. Fabricating a cover story for the actual night of a murder is standard procedure for any calculated criminal. You orchestrate your defense while plotting the attack, leaving your mobile behind and your vehicle visible to establish a false digital stillness. However, that practice run on the 23rd was just an arbitrary evening a week prior to the main tragedy. The villain had no clue a lens was recording or that a canine would alert, so in his arrogance, he became careless. He likely carried his actual device right in his trousers and drove a car registered in his own name. There was no attempt to obscure his electronic trail because he never imagined anyone would look back that far. Investigators are almost certainly executing a massive cellular data extraction right now. They are gathering logs from every cell site, spanning 6.5 miles from the house, for January 23rd, targeting units active between 1 and 3 in the morning to cross-reference against the February 1st data. They are hunting for the single digital signature that overlaps in both distinct timelines. If devices owned by Tommaso Annie or their inner circle register at the trial run on January 23rd and the crime scene on February 1st, legal counsel will be powerless to explain it. Constructing a lie for one specific event is challenging but achievable with enough foresight. Forging a double alibi for random dates 9 days apart, unaware the first is under scrutiny, is virtually impossible. While he may have obscured his physical features with a mask, he failed to mute the electronic beacon broadcasting from his pocket. At this very moment, that silent transmission might serve as the most damning testimony of all, so I'm passing the verdict to you. We have weighed the defense and the oddities, so tell me your theory below because I personally review every comment. Is this a heartbreaking saga of a household entrapped in a horror they did not manufacture? Or was this terror engineered from within the home, considering Nancy has been gone for 20 days with a heart condition? Her survival depends entirely on her daily prescriptions. The truth of January 31st exists somewhere, whether held by a lurker in the dark or the very people who tucked her in 4 hours prior. Genetic analysis is pending, and we will dissect the findings immediately upon release, so hit subscribe and stay tuned. This story is a haunting reminder that behind every viral headline and digital noise, there is a human heartbeat, a mother, a neighbor, and a soul whose life hangs in the balance. The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie teaches us a profound, albeit chilling lesson. The greatest security we have is not found in hardware, but in our humanity. In an age of ring sensors and cloud recordings, we often outsource our vigilance to machines. But as we've seen, technology has boot-up sequences and lags that can be exploited. True protection cannot be bought for $20 at a hardware store. It is built through the unwavering presence we offer our elders. Nancy, dependent on her daily heart medication, represents the fragility of a generation that deserves more than just a secluded estate. They deserve our time, our scrutiny, and our protection from the shadows, whether those shadows come from strangers or from within the home. Let this tragedy be a wake-up call to cherish your loved ones before they vanish into thin air. Don't wait for a dry run or a red flag to look closer at the people in your orbit. In the end, when the raw data is filed away, the only thing that truly matters is the truth we speak while the lights are still on.